During the Soviet period, art in Lithuania was restricted by a control system. Painters had to pay their tribute to the semi-official style. However, the Soviets did not manage to completely suppress free self-expression by artists. When considering the inheritance of art from the Soviet period in the context of compliance, it can be divided into three groups: works of art or creative methods that were encouraged by the state, tolerated art, and prohibited art. Works of official art that were obviously ideologically engaged belonged to the first group. Uncompromising examples of free expression belonged to the third group. During the entire Soviet period, there were only a few painters who could be called real nonconformists in Lithuania. The works of Kazimieras Zimblytė, Eugenijus Antanas Cukermanas, Linas Leonas Katinas, and Vladislovas Žilius were most ignored. Kazimieras Zimblytė was not invited to painting exhibitions. Linas Katinas and Eugenijus Cukermanas, who finished architecture studies, were not acknowledged as professional painters. Vladislovas Žilius, because of the conflicts with the Soviet government, emigrated to the United States in 1976. The portion of partially compromising art, which is very colorful and most abundant in quantity, goes in between the official art and the art that was completely unacceptable to the Soviets. Most painters found ways to adjust to the requirements enforced by the Soviet officials. The goal for the adjustment was to at least slightly participate in public artistic life. Their pieces of art were more or less displayed in exhibitions and reproduced in albums. For this reason, they had to knowingly and sometimes very painfully push themselves towards official requirements, or at least towards tolerable boundaries. However, works of art by artists who had modern views and for whom preservation of the creative freedom was more important than recognition rarely received publicity. After Stalin's death, repression in the Soviet Union was ended and some democratization began. This time is called the warming up period. Lithuanian painters of that time were open to experiments. At the beginning of the 60s, artists with avant-garde views gathered together into small informal groups of like-minded people. In 1962, in Vilnius's Jerusalem district, in a tiny street of summer resorts from the interwar period, the family of the sculptor Vladas Vildžiūnas and the graphic artist Marija Ladigaitė settled. Their home became a center attracting artists who were thirsty for free ideas and a place for philosophical discussions. A friendly community of young teachers with modern views gathered together in the art department of Mikalojus Konstantinas Čiurlionis School of Art. The home of sculptor Vytautas Šerys and his wife Judita Šerienė became famous for unofficial avant-garde art exhibitions. Exhibitions of this type were also quasi-legal, held in public places. Semi-legal exhibitions of this type were also held in public places, at the Writers' Association Club, the Vilnius Conservatoire of the time, the State Library, the publishing house Vaga, the Design Institute for City Construction, and the Panevėžys Drama Theatre. The contemporary artistic trends in Europe and the United States of the 20th century impressed Lithuanian avant-garde artists. Artists from the interwar period of independent Lithuania were also considered very important. Much interest was shown in the works of the Ars group members and expressive pieces of art created by the graphic artists of the 30s. Folk art became an important source of inspiration. Painters concentrated on the influence of a specific language of art, which was determined by the means of expression characteristic to it. Modern creative methods were spreading, different non-traditional materials were used, and individual techniques were created. The artists from Jonas Švaras' generation that pushed painting towards modernism, for the most part remained within the boundaries of the range of themes propagated by the Soviets. For most of them, this helped them earn official recognition. The slightly younger artists Vincas Kisarauskas and Valentinas Antanavičius held more radical views. Instead of universally propagated optimism, they depicted dramatic and tragic human fate. These artists did not fit within the boundaries of traditional painting. They were interested in forms of content and the problems of interaction between the painting and space. They were the first in Lithuania to start creating assemblages, three-dimensional works of art made from different things or their parts and fixed on a framed flat surface. Around the same time, Antanas Kmieliauskas started engraving tekstolita, layered plastic art consisting of several layers of fabric soaked in tar. Using the characteristics of the multi-layered material, the artist created unique embossed imprints of graphic arts. At the beginning of the 70s, the sculptors Kazimieras Teodoras Valaitis, Steponas Šarapovas, Mindaugas Navakas and Petras Mazūras started using non-traditional materials for creation, and Vladas Vildžiūnas began to make sculptures from bronze. At the end of the 60s, the need for artists to distance themselves from the imitation of reality lingered. Painters, sculptors, and graphic artists were interested in the constructivist and surrealist art of the interwar period. They interpreted the creative principles of cubist artists and, transforming nature, created semi-abstract works of art with geometrical forms. Many painters were attracted to abstraction, although most of them did not completely move away from reality. Vytautas Povilaitis was among the first abstractionists. Kazimiera Zimblytė, Eugenijus Cukermanas, Linas Leonas Katinas, and Rūta Katiliūtė, the graphic artists Rimtautas Gibavičius and Algirdas Steponavičius, and the sculptors Teodoras Kazimieras Valaitis, Steponas Šarapovas, and Vytautas Šerys also became interested in abstract painting. It is often noted that at the beginning of the 70s, Lithuanian art turned in the direction of chamber-style art. Artists constricted by the Soviet system had to fit within a small group of like-minded people, secretly share topical themes and experiences, and get used to the duplicity that permeated all aspects of life, as one thing was said in public and a completely different thing was actually thought about and discussed. Life under such conditions encouraged artists to explore their environment more carefully and concentrate on the small things that were closest to them. Confrontation with vigorous reality brought a wave of skepticism into art. In the mid-60s, the painters Algimantas Kuras, Kostas Dereškevičius, Algimantas Švėgžda, and Arvydas Šaltenis, who were not very prone to compromise, entered the arena of Lithuanian painting. These painters are called the generation of anti-romanticists, because naked, banal, and unadorned daily life is conveyed in their paintings. This kind of depiction completely contradicted the requirements of the Soviet government to convey only the positive side of life through art and give a didactic purpose. The painters were criticized for the fact that they depicted the negative side of Soviet reality. In the second half of the 60s, the young artists Mindaugas Skudutis, Henrikas Natalevičius, Raimondas Šlyžys, and Bronius Gražys, who were actively involved in the creative world, extended the tradition of the depiction of the seamy side of life and the tendency to dethrone heroes. They were united by an ironic attitude towards the world and themselves. In their paintings, we can see quite horrific and mixed-up world inhabited by appalling creatures. A critical and ironic attitude towards the surrounding environment, and sometimes even aggression, emanate from etched paintings created by Edmundas Saladžius, Mikalojus Povilas Vilutis, and Vytautas Jurkūnas the Jr. A poetic and metaphorical trend evoking associative thinking is pronounced in graphic arts and sculpture of the 70s and 80s. Artists lyrically interpreted small elements of the environment created by humans and elements of nature, and envisaged universal meanings and reflections of eternal values in them. The graphic artists Stasys Eidrigevičius, Gražina Didelytė, Danutė Jonkaitytė, Irena Daukšaitė Gobienė, Jūratė Stauskaitė, and Birutė Stančikaitė, as well as sculptors Vladas Vildžiūnas, Vytautas Šerys, Leonas Strioga, Gediminas Karalius, Petras Mazūras, Rimantas Daugintis, Vladas Urbonavičius, and Ksenija Jaroševaitė grew to join this type of expression. It shifts from the realities of life to the world of intellectual and emotional visions. The idea of the primeval became more popular during the junction of the decades. Artists looked for a basis for creativity in archaic cultures and envisaged visual beauty and universally meaningful layers in them. Around the mid-80s, creative restrictions started weakening. After Mikhail Gorbachev came to power in 1985, a period of democratization began. The Lithuanian Reform Movement, formed in 1988, provided strong momentum towards freedom for the community. Older painters took the paintings that had been forbidden until that time out of their workshops. The younger ones had opportunities for free artistic expression. Manifestations of postmodernism were gradually becoming stronger. Free manipulation of references to art from the past, which eliminates historical boundaries between cultures and conceptual relationship to both surroundings and different realities of life, were the most pronounced artistic themes of that time.